Latveria is a small country, situated along the border of where Europe becomes Asia. If you're wondering where on a map it might actually sit, the nation is made from lands that were annexed at some point in its history, from southern Hungary, Serbia, and Romania. To its immediate south is another fictional Marvel Universe nation, that of Symkaria, who has enjoyed a mostly peaceful, respectful relationship with its neighbor to the north. This is a very good thing, for while Symkaria is ruled by the proud, brave, and semi-heroic mercenary Silver Sablinova, better known as Silver Sable, Latveria has a less than heroic ruler. As an absolute monarch, Latveria is ruled by just one man, Victor von Doom, and nothing else. There is no form of governmental body, there is no legislature, no ruling council that Doom oversees and he makes the final decisions on. No, it's just him. And through his actions alone, Latveria is a nation feared in direct contrast to its size. Due to its largely insular governmental focus, small size, and location in the world, the larger world doesn't really know much about what Latveria is like. The nation is relatively poor, with little in the way of exports or imports. In fact, if you look at Latveria, you might think that you've traveled back in time by 60 to 100 years, maybe. Many of the buildings are still built of stone and wood, sitting directly against each other in the capital city of Darmstadt. There are no skyscrapers of steel and glass, no modern architectural cues, nothing like that. Green forests and farmland surround the city, which is overlooked by Castle Doom, a massive stone fortress that sits upon a hill nearby. The lack of progress and personal freedoms might be anathema to an American-based audience. Indeed, while picturesque, Latveria generally has more in common with modern-day China or North Korea's personal freedom philosophies. Add to that how often Dr. Doom has been a maniacal villain, and it is easy to think that he rules the country using fear and his advanced technologies. But as the Fantastic Four enter the city, they are greeted by joyous throngs of the populace, cheers of happiness, and ticker tape showers over them. Ben Grimm has to admit, "These people love Dr. Doom." And Reed seems to love being Dr. Doom, Johnny notes. He's playing to the crowd like he was born to it. Reed and Sue lead the other two, shaking hands, kissing babies, assuring the people that their rightful ruler has finally returned. Ben then tells Johnny to shut up. He then re-explains that they can't let anyone know that it's Dr. Doom's greatest enemy under that armor, or who knows what'll happen. The Burgomeister, or mayor, of Darmstadt and some members of the aristocratic strata greet and welcome their beloved leader. Things have been difficult in his absence. Doom assures the man that such times have passed. Sue, meanwhile, chats with a countess about Latveria and how it's viewed incorrectly by the rest of the world. Both women are polite in their conversation, but they also get their individual points across in it. Sue brings up that Dr. Doom could easily be labeled a tyrant with his actions. The Countess, on the other hand, welcomes Sue on behalf of Latveria because it has to, not necessarily because they want to. But if Sue is truly honest about learning about her new home, then she will come to love it as much as they do, she assures her. Dr. Doom moves to his wife, asking if she's okay after the chat. She's been pensive and withdrawn since their arrival here. Sue smiles tiredly in response. She just isn't used to this kind of treatment. Her husband assures her that the royal titles and costumes are just for the public. So long as they love each other, they can get through anything. And then they hug. But Sue's heart just isn't in it. She saw that Reed could escape the armor that he is trapped inside, but instead he chooses to wear it. Worse, he managed to access the Fantastic Four's computer systems and, since it recognizes him as Victor Von Doom, gave himself command access to, well, everything, including the biometric data that's collected at all times by their Fantastic Four costumes. Sue can't even risk telling Johnny and Ben about this either for fear of what Reed might do to them if something is wrong. What is an invisible woman to do? My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 12.24, Fantastic Four, Volume 3, Trading Places. The Fantastic Four move into Castle Doom, and Reed explains that recent events in other comics have shown that Latveria without Doom is vulnerable. There are just too many dangerous pieces of technology just waiting to be stolen or misused. Ben can guess the rest. So they're moving in to keep those weapons from falling into the wrong hands, huh? Yeah, that's smart. Reed adds that he has cleared the Fantastic Four in the castle's security systems, so the defenses won't bother them while they work. Now, soonest begun is soonest done. Reed leaves the three to do their work, dismantling those pieces of technology. He has matters of state to attend to. Sue excuses herself, hoping to change out of her Fantastic Four meets Dr. Doom meets royalty outfit, but she's blocked by the household chief of staff, a man named Dita. He has the Baroness's schedule right here, and she has meetings with the staff to attend to, clothing fittings, foreign delegations to greet, there's the visit to the local hospital and school, and there is a ward ceremony to attend. He pauses. And that's all before lunch. Shall he continue? Johnny asks if Dieter has anything for he and Ben to do, and he does not. So they go for a walk, taking in the beautiful castle grounds. They lament Sue's fate for a moment, but then Johnny moves on to how weird their situation right now is. They are in the heart of Dr. Doom's homeland, and they have absolutely allowed themselves to be split up. If Doom was really here, they would never let such a thing happen. They would be on their guard to the nines. But since it's Reed here instead, they don't even question it. Ben can see the point there, but, come on, it is Reed. And he's got a good reason about why they're here. It all checks out. That makes it even worse to Johnny, though. Reed always makes sense, sure, but nowadays he is sounding less and less like Reed, and more like Doom. And it freaks him out. He'll admit it. Inside of the castle, Reed sits atop his throne, hands folded before him as he listens into the conversation that we've been witnessing. He thanks Johnny for the compliment, and for behaving exactly how he thought they would. Over the costume links, Johnny jokingly complains about Reed deactivating the security measures. It just isn't a trip to Latveria without busting up a few Doombots, shake loose the cobwebs. Reed smiles at this. Thank you for the suggestion, Johnny. He presses a series of buttons and then contacts the pair. It seems that there has been an error in the castle programming. Weird. And some of the Doombots might read them as hostile as a result of this. So, be on your guard just in case, bros. And sure enough, 4 Doombots rush from the castle, ready to crack some skulls. As the pair begin fighting them, Sue hears the sound of combat and she rushes to join the boys. They defeat the robots fairly easily, and Reed assures them that he has fixed the error that caused the attack. Best that they all return to their work, yes? But before she can leave, Ben stops Sue. He could hear something in her voice when she spoke to Reed, something extra. Is she okay? Sue promises him that she is just jet-lagged and gives him a hug to reassure him. As she leaves, though, Ben could swear that hug wasn't really for him. She was holding on to him for dear life. But why? What's wrong? If you only knew, Ben. Claremont does his usual opening work with issue 30 here, recapping our recent events and setting things up. I actually really appreciate how smoothly he sums things up here. It has worked into the narrative very seamlessly. It's a lot of exposition work, but you don't even really pick up that it's exposition work. It feels very conversational, which admittedly, for Claremont, most of his conversations feel like exposition, so this is a bit of a flip on that, but again, it works. It didn't bother me at all. We also get to see that Reed is becoming more and more Doom-like with this intro. And yeah, we have the usual Reed has to be like Doom because he's in a disguise explanation for his behavior, But we also have Sue's mysterious scene to reckon with. Is Reed pretending to be Doctor Doom for an altruistic purpose? Or has something horrible gone on? Are they really in Latveria to safeguard its weapons? Or because maybe Reed was beginning to feel homesick? Claremont makes sure to provide a reasonable explanation for every move that we see Reed make, but we also have these background concerns that are gnawing at us. That's a nice bit of tension in the background of the issue that I really enjoy, and it's carefully planted by Claremont. That's very nicely done. Clearly, that tension all culminates, if only for a moment, in Reed unleashing the Doombots on Ben and Johnny. This is a weird story beat for me, as it really serves no function other than making Reed look suspicious, but only to us as the audience. And we know that Reed looks suspicious. We saw what Sue saw, and Sue recapped what she saw, so we know what's going on there. Reed had already given the Fantastic Four clearance, and they had even entered Castle Doom without being attacked at all, and he then made a point of telling them about it. So when he sicks those Doombots on them, he isn't distracting them or keeping them from their work. They weren't doing anything, and Johnny had already voiced his suspicions about their situation. So if the attack was meant as a distraction, it clearly failed. I suppose that it's possible that maybe Reed was testing either their capabilities or the Doombots, but he also has access to both Doctor Doom's and the Fantastic Four's information now. He has tons of info at his fingertips, so I feel like that would be a really weak explanation. I feel like the main reason for this scene, the actual explanation, is that it's just there so that we have a fight scene in this issue, and that, to me, makes it unnecessary. We have much more interesting ideas to explore, and I would rather that the pages were focused on exploring those ideas than literally interrupting the story for a fight scene in which the villain then tells the heroes, okay, great, now get back to work. That just doesn't make sense to me. It would have made much more sense if the Fantastic Four had arrived at the castle and then immediately come under attack. Reed could have, let the fight go on for maybe a little longer than necessary so that he seems shifty, maybe even to Johnny, like this could be the thing that tips him off. But then he would use his authority as Doctor Doom to stop the attack. Maybe the Doombots wouldn't even attack him, highlighting that there is a separation between Reed and the team. This could even reinforce Ben's faith in Reed because he stopped the attack and he is successful in pretending that he's Doctor Doom, but reinforce Sue's mistrust of him and introduce Johnny's mistrust of him. That would have furthered all of our narratives and put this interesting divide between the Fantastic Four, where if Johnny's talking to Ben about, I don't think I trust Reed, Ben's going to argue, why not, I think things are fine. I do like Ben's sensitivity to Sue's mood, though. Notice that he was not only the first member of the team to recognize Reed inside of that armor, but he is also the first guy to notice that something is wrong with Sue. Despite his hardened exterior and tough guy persona, Ben is a sweet, sensitive man. But you would think that very sensitivity would lead Ben to suspecting the changes in Reed, too. After all, if he could tell that Reed was in Doom's armor, you'd think he would tell that Reed was making some strange plays. However, Ben's years of trust and faith in Reed are blinding him. After all, the only reason that Sue is upset at all is because she literally witnessed Reed's lie. This would be a very different story if she had never seen him at all and the Fantastic Four just went to Latveria to dismantle Doctor Doom's weapons. None of them would have any reason to suspect Reed, and we would still be on the trust train. I also love the art team's depiction of Doomstot. There is a 2-page spread set in the town when the Fantastic Four arrive, and it is just so pretty. I love the stone and wood buildings. They make me think of Munich, which is where Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was filmed. And I just love the cityscapes in that movie. When I think of, I'm doing broad hand waves right now, old European architecture, this kind of stuff is what I think of. And it just looks so good to me here. Also, that shot of Doom on his throne when he unleashes the Doombots, beautiful. I wish I could get that as a poster. God, it's hot. Alright, back to the story. As the day has worn on, Sue got fitted by the household staff. When she asked after her husband, she is told that he's unavailable. At dinner, when she asks, she is told the same. As she is prepped for bed, she is told the same. Made ready for her husband, Sue sits on the bed in a sleek pink nightgown. She can actually hear Reed at work in the next room, and yet he still won't make time to visit her. She's just expected to wait for him. Well, floop that! Frustrated, Sue undoes her ponytail and lies down. Has the man that she loves the most become the man that she fears the most? Somehow, and I do not know how, Sue does manage to fall asleep. But it is not a restful sleep. In her dream, she's in her costume, standing on the balcony of the old Baxter Building. A bright yellow sun sinks into the flooded waters of New York City, and the salty breeze blows at her hair. She immediately recognizes the world that her son, Franklin, created, the reborn Earth. Or, as it's also unfortunately known, Planet Doom. Sue just cannot believe that this is all a dream. It all feels so real. Behind her, Victor Von Doom says that it is close to reality. Sue spins around, immediately launching an attack with her force field. Doom deflects it with a wave, though, wishing peace upon her. He isn't here as a threat. He's here to ask for her help. The apostate returned him to the reborn Earth sans his armor, and, while yes, he has found ways to survive, he needs to be restored to his full strength. This is also to the benefit of her husband. Doom's armor was made to fit only him, and as Reed has learned its systems, it has been training him to think like Victor. Think of the armor as haunted, and Reed is now a man possessed by it. Victor then goes on to explain that he has placed a terminus for a teleporter on the reborn Earth. All Sue needs to do is activate the end of it that is inside of Castle Doom, and he can return and reclaim his armor, and everything can go back to normal. To that end, he is using his magical prowess to contact Sue through the aboriginal Australian state of Dreamtime. The only way that they can save Reed and the reborn Earth is if they trust one another. He reaches out, touching Sue on the shoulder, but her horror at this idea is so real that when she shakes him off, she also shakes awake. Reed, inside of Doom's armor, rushes to her side. He was so wrapped up in his work that he just lost track of time. When he finally came to bed, Sue was already asleep, and he didn't want to disturb her, but seeing this, is she okay? Sue wipes at her tears, wishing that he was just Reed Richards once more. But verbally she says no instead, she's fine. It was only a dream. As the day goes on, the Fantastic Four do actually work on dismantling or storing the dangerous technologies of Doom. As they do, Reed monitors their progress and discussions while running a number of computer simulations. We don't have an explained context for those simulations yet, but they show us New York City, Moscow, and Beijing, but they've been transformed into technologically advanced cities, like they have towering skyways and hovering transports littering the air. The days continue to roll on. Each night, Sue is haunted by dreams of Victor Von Doom begging for help. Each day, Reed runs more simulations. This time, for example, envisioning a future for Cairo, where the barren Sahara Desert has been turned into fields of fertile farmland. Victor argues that, under the influence of his armor, they will find that Reed's vision of the world will be as threatening as Victor's. Emphasizing the point, Reed figures that the fastest way to resolve any kind of governmental conflict to his rule would be to introduce a semi-sentient computer program to their systems. Yes, this would slave their command systems back to him, preventing the world militaries from even launching an initial attack. Yeah, that would be perfect. And ominous. That night, Reed actually joins his family for dinner for the first time in days. It isn't for long, as he quickly attempts to excuse himself because of greater matters, but Ben stops him. Hey, they ain't seen him in days. How about taking the night off and playing a game of chess? The world ain't gonna end if he relaxes for one night, right? Reed takes him up on his offer, but Sue excuses herself for the night. She's got a headache. Johnny follows after his sister, now finally worried. Something is clearly wrong here. He asks if she wants to talk to him, hugging her, but she tells him no, as a single tear runs down her invisible face. He assures Sue that whatever she does, he'll stand by her. Then he returns to the dining room, and Sue goes to bed. Victor visits her again, of course. She claims that he is lying about everything, but if that was true, then why hasn't he told Reed and the others about his visits? She knows that he's telling the truth. She just doesn't want to believe it. Once again, she snaps awake. Not much time has passed since she went to bed. Reed's lab is empty. She doesn't hear him at all. This is why Claremont did the scene earlier with Sue waiting on the bed for him, to establish that she can hear him in that room, which gives her the all clear to take action in this scene and not suspect that she would be caught. She then uses her force field to bust inside of the lab. Upstairs, this causes an alarm to go off. Johnny rushes to a monitor, which reports that someone has broken into the lab. Get that. We see Sue smash through a window and then exit the lab on an invisible slab. Reed assures Johnny that whoever broke in, they won't get very far. Flares then begin to burst in the air around Sue in an attempt to distract her and destabilize her force field. She manages to maintain it, keeping her from plummeting to the ground, but this means that she has to stop moving, and this allows some Doombots to surround her. They pick her up and bring her back to the castle, and she is soon joined by Johnny and Ben. They are absolutely confused as to what's going on with her, and honestly so is Reed. But he doesn't visit them personally. No, he just speaks through the speakers on the Doombots. Sue demands that he face her in person and that they finally go home. But Reed calmly replies that they are home. That's what Sue thought. She uses her force field to surround Johnny and Ben with her, forcing them to follow her into the castle. She takes them to a hidden alcove and lifts Victor's teleporter. Ben asks Susie if she knows what she's doing, and she says yes. She's made her choice. Reed then enters the room. Doesn't he have any say in this? With a gesture, he destabilizes Sue's force field, and then suddenly his arm shoots out, stretching across the space. He's found a way to let Dr. Doom's armor stretch like his body. He grabs the device and pulls it away from Sue. But this is her one chance. She won't miss her chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime, and she strikes out with a thin beam of invisible force. She smacks the button to activate it. And in a burst of blinding light, Victor Von Doom stands before the Fantastic Four. Prepare to be humbled, Richards, as you face your doom. Blah, 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 blah. Obligatory doom ending. We get it, man. We've seen it before. This is probably the fastest moving Chris Claremont plot that I've ever read. Seriously, the fact that we see several day and night cycles in rapid succession with minor story progress in each one is a very weird thing for Claremont to do. As we've seen, Claremont likes to let a plotline breathe. The lead up to the reborn Earth's arrival in our reality was hinted at back in Claremont's second issue of this run, and this Reed as Doom plot was hinted back 10 issues ago. And there's clearly enough story ground to be covered here in like a 6-issue story arc. Like, I'm just talking about how the Fantastic Four adjust to life in Latveria, and how Reed justifies whatever ideas he's about to start trying to sell to the team. But, as I said last episode, Claremont is leaving the Fantastic Four, so he doesn't have years to wrap this up. He has issues, and so that means we start moving fast in this one. I really enjoy the idea that Doom's armor makes Reed think like Doom in order to use it, and so it is training him to be Dr. Doom. I don't quite like Victor's pitch that it's haunted and that it's possessing Reed, as quite frankly that just sounds silly in a book that is so grounded in science fantasy. But there's a reason I use the term science fantasy and not science fiction, because Victor Von Doom is an able sorcerer. For a long time, this facet of Doom's character was fairly underplayed in the comics, for the very reason that I stated above. It's kind of silly to have such a science-based character fight other science-based characters with spells and finger waves and mystical hoo-ha. You folks know what I mean. Bamf and magic. But in the past 5 to 8 years, Marvel has really pushed to highlight this aspect of Doom's character. This is also what allows Victor to chat with Sue, and that is well within his capabilities, and it makes sense. It also drives Sue even further into the heart of this story, which started as a story about Reed and his difficulties pretending to be Dr. Doom, but has transitioned into a story about Sue saving her husband and her family. The themes here are so great. The idea that Reed might be planning to take over the world for its own good is great, and it makes perfect sense that if he started thinking like Doom, then he would be motivated to the same actions as Doom. I love Victor coming to Sue in dreams. It almost feels like a torrid love affair, like she's cheating on her husband with the man of her dreams, but then it's all inverted by the fact that Reed is becoming Doom, and Doom, by extension, has to become the good guy in order to stop him. That's very clever, and it's super cool to me. I will argue that the visits with Victor don't really feel like they peak at all. He just makes the same argument every night, that the armor is corrupting Reed and that he'll threaten the world soon and only Sue can help him stop it, and then eventually Sue cracks and goes for it. I would have liked to have seen those conversations escalate more, or perhaps have Sue learn or see things about Reed during these few days that convince her that he's becoming lost in the suit, and that Victor's arguments are the straw that finally breaks her back. That even in her dreams, she cannot escape the truth. The idea that Reed is becoming what she fears most. The basic point of it is gotten across, and perhaps with more time and more issues, Claremont may have played things that way, but we didn't have the time to wait to see that happen. This stuff here all works perfectly fine. I'm just being really picky. I will fully admit that. This is an enjoyable comic, and this is an enjoyable plot element. Do I want more? Sure, but I would always take more cake. It's fine. There are some nice artistic touches when we do those dream sequences too. Larroca forgoes the usual thick black lines that indicate a panel border. Instead, there are multiple thin lines, almost like the camera is having trouble focusing on the panel, and they're all in white, making them appear ephemeral or non-existent. There are also no solid blacks on Sue in the inking, which again makes her feel kind of like an unreal part of the environment. Victor directly contrasts with this, as he's not just fully inked, but he is just draped in shadows. He is wearing an improvised set of clothes, including thick smelting gloves, leather armor, and he's got a new leather face mask that leaves his lower jaw exposed. We can kind of see scarred, chunky flesh visible where it's not covering, but he does also have on a billowing green cloak to hide what he can. He's clearly been through some stuff. And before we continue with the Fantastic Four's confrontation, we're going to go see that stuff. Published in October of 2000, Doom is a 3-issue miniseries written by author Chuck Dixon and was drawn by artist Leonardo Manco. There are 2 strange things about this miniseries that I want to point out. The first is that it was published 5 months after Fantastic Four issue 30, which we just broke down. So while this story fills in the gaps of what Victor Von Doom experienced between issues 25 and 30, it was not published concurrently with it. The second strange thing is that this miniseries was not written by Chris Claremont. Claremont, as an author, is fairly well known for setting up mysteries or dangling plot threads or ideas to be explored later on, in an annual or a one-shot or a graphic novel or a miniseries, whatever he could talk editorial into doing. But he is also kind of famous for not being able to make those goals come true. Sometimes editorial reins over him would change, and a character or a storyline would fall out of favor, and they would just never be picked up upon again. Sometimes he would just move on as an author and then focus on more pressing matters that were important to the story. But rarely, almost never, would someone else pick up one of Claremont's ideas and write it for themselves. Was this miniseries an idea that Claremont had with Marvel, but when he left the Fantastic Four he couldn't finish it, so it got passed to Dixon and Manco? Is Dixon just a big Dr. Doom fan, and maybe even he wanted to know what happened in between those issues? Maybe the editor was the fan, and so they hired Dixon to fill in the blanks. There's also the fact that since this book was published in October, that meant that the creative team was working on it since at least September, the first month of the creative team post-Claremont. So maybe fans wrote in demanding to know what happened to Doom and why he had such a different look, and then editorial decided to explore the idea. Unfortunately, the early 2000s are not the most archived era of comic book history, so I can't seem to find a concrete answer. We're just going to have to read it ourselves and see what happens and hopefully enjoy the ride. Issue 1 of Doom opens on Reborn Earth. I refuse to call it Planet Doom. And he is naked and alone, auditioning for a new Discovery Channel show. No, I'm sorry. And he's naked and alone, kneeling next to the shallow trickle of a river. He drinks from his hands, listening, trying to pay attention to the area around him. A gazelle suddenly runs by, leading a hunting male lion to the naked human. Victor recognizes that he has invaded the animal's territory, that the lion needs to kill him, to punish the intruder, to protect itself, and to feed. But Victor can't allow that to happen. With his armor, Victor could have killed the lion in an instant, with one blast, maybe even just the flick of a finger. But his armor is back on Earth Classic, so instead he is forced to outskill the lion instead. Using speed and precision, he dodges the swiping claws and manages to deliver a single strike to where the lion's brainstem connects to its spine. It drops dead, and Victor goes to work. Using a stone knife, Victor uses its bones and sinews to fashion weapons and string. He uses the meat to eat, and he uses the skin to fashion a mask. And some new armor, but it's just hide armor. Victor studies the stars as night sets, using them to chart his position much more accurately. He is in the Serengeti, somewhere in Africa, and he is thousands of miles away from civilization. But he's confident about one thing. He will persevere. Right away, author Chuck Dixon sets a tone for this book. There is narration running through Victor's adventure, his inner monologue, which explains what's happening from his perspective, but it also helps to sell that tone. Gone are Claremont's wordy speeches and poetic diatribes. Here, Victor speaks in single sentences, just one statement at a time. He assesses his situation and then works to improve it. Nothing more and nothing less. Just completely pragmatic. This drive is consistent with Claremont's interpretation of Victor, by the way, but it feels much more refined and honed here. Here in this comic, Victor is a survivor, even with no armor, tools, or weapons, and that is honestly what makes him such a compelling character. And we got to see this kind of assess the situation and work to improve it mindset in the Heroes Reborn Doomsday one-shot that Claremont wrote oh so long ago. So again, it's nice to see two different takes on the exact same character that feel very different while highlighting the exact same qualities. That's nice character work. Dixon also does a single page to reference the events of Fantastic Four issue 25, including the fall of the Apostate and his punishment of Reed and Doom. So, a newcomer to this book immediately knows how Victor got into the situation and has an issue number to look up if they want to know more. That's great. I like a nice, helpful editorial note. Artist Leonardo Manco is a very different artist from Salvador Larroca, though. Most of the comics that I have included in this collection, the crossover issues, the annuals, the Heroes Reborn event books, while they aren't consistent artistically, are generally very bright and clean and pretty heroic looking. But Manco has a very dark artistic style. He draws his figures fairly realistically with these deep black shadows just everywhere. And it all looks like it was inked using brushwork. There are a lot of rough, undefined edges, and there's almost like a paint splatter over some of the images. It totally works for the book, though. This is a story of Victor overcoming nature, man, and opposition on a world ravaged by ecological and man-made disasters. The darker artwork makes everything feel dirty, bleak, heavy, real. You can feel the sand whipping against Victor as he walks the sands of the Serengeti. It just works. When I was a kid, I really did not like Manco's artwork when I first encountered it, but now I have to admit that it is pretty great. Totally not my personal style, but that's fine. That's just my own personal tastes coming into play. But everything here is executed very well, and it looks good. There are some high contrast shots that the coloring by Mariana Sanzone doesn't help, but even that actually kind of fits the rough feel that the artwork has in general. It's a little hard to complain and say that the coloring isn't good when it really complements how rough everything else is, so it's a weird trade-off for me. At Doom Center, aka the Baxter Building in flooded New York City, we find Samantha Dunbar, aka Lancer. A face on a computer screen, who she refers to as Bregan, reports that someone is trying to access the building using outdated codes. Lancer tells him to deny them access to the building, but they manage to get inside and they appear to be Dr. Doom? He's got the gray armor, a green cloak with a hood, even the voice is a close match. But Lancer knows that this isn't Victor, and then she blasts him with her plasma, killing him. Then she tells Bregan to dump the body and let it float down Broadway. Maybe it'll send a message to their enemies. Bregan asks how long they'll have to hold the Baxter Building, and Lancer says that they will hold it until Doom returns. Bregan has to ask, what if he doesn't? Lancer sets her jaw. Then they'll die in his name. Damn, woman! So we now know Lancer's situation. She's holding the fort until Doom can save himself. We see that she's confident, ruthless, and unmoving on her beliefs. We also see her powers demonstrated, but they're not explained, so if a new writer didn't know her already, then this scene might not really help them get to know her. After all, while Dixon establishes that Lancer is at least allied with Doom, we don't know the nature of their relationship based on this scene, or why she has such faith in his return. The scene is very economical, establishing where Doom is trying to go, which then lets us focus on how he gets there, but a new reader might find this moment kind of confusing. I'll fully admit that. Back in Africa, Victor finally sees man-made lights on the horizon. There isn't a city at this location on Earth Classic. This ain't Earth Classic. He travels to the lights, and, the next morning, he discovers a large mining facility inside the entrance to a canyon. They will have tools that Victor can use. Excellent. A voice then shouts at Victor to stay where he is, and a bunch of Mad Max extras come charging at him on custom motorcycles. The leader announces that he's in the domain of Al-Khalad. He can either accept slavery or die. Real quick, Al-Khalad is a name that we have heard before on this podcast. Back in Heroes Reborn Doom, the final issue of the Heroes Reborn event, Doom and his commander saved the Prince of Wakanda from the weaponeers of Al-Khalad. We learn that Al-Khalad was a warlord moving across Africa, claiming it for his own. So this is a group with high-tech weapons, some decent technology, and the manpower to pull off continental warfare. So, this is almost an even fight for a guy like Victor Von Doom. Victor scoffs at the motorcycle guy. Doom enslaved? Never. Then he hurls his makeshift spear, landing it right in the lead man's chest. He ducks down a crevice and then tosses out a bone hook that is attached to some lion gut, and it hooks onto the next bike in the line. The rider is then pulled into a large stone and the vehicle explodes, killing him. Victor picks up the guns that survived the explosion and then mows down the rest of the surviving men. Then he scavenges what he can off of them, including a green bandana and cloak, some gloves, boots, pants, and enough belts to make a Kingdom Hearts character proud. Before he can make his next move, though, an electrified whip slashes across his back, driving him to his knees. More men then surround him, but this group includes a tall man wearing rich robes of red with golden designs on it. He has a thin mustache, long eyelashes, painted lips, and pierced eyebrows on his face. The face of Al-Khalad himself. He looks down on Victor. Despite this man's ugliness, he clearly is strong. He will make an excellent slave. This is a well-placed action scene. Dixon has been using his action sequences to inform us about the characters that we are seeing and the world that he is exploring. The lion fight scene showed us Victor's skills and consideration. Lancer's fight scene showed us her situation, Victor's goal, and informed us of her personality and what's at stake here. This scene not only reinforced Victor's skills in combat, armed only with makeshift tools against men who were much better armed with vehicles, but also using those tools left Doom without them, which is what allows him to be snuck up upon and ultimately captured. If you compare this to Claremont's use of the Doombots in Fantastic Four issue 30, which didn't tell us anything that we didn't already know, nor did it demonstrate any new skills of its combatants or set up the next scene, it's like two different worlds. There is a difference between a good fight scene and a bad fight scene, and this is a good example of both. A short time later, Victor wakes up to the effects of cold water being power washed onto him. Naked, save for some cloth around his junk, his jailer, who is a fat man named Tuvo, introduces himself and orders that Victor be taken to his cell. As he's escorted through the facility, Victor smiles inwardly. While this was not his preferred method of entry into this facility, he is exactly where he wants to be. He sees a satellite-linked communications center, explosive chemicals, a long-range maglev vehicle. Everything that an up-and-coming despot needs to take over the world. Then he is shoved into a cell and finds others there. Men and women of all shapes and sizes fill the cell. Some of them are either cyborgs or they have metal pieces on them as clothing. It's very hard to tell with Monko's artwork. He really likes to draw technology, and he puts it kind of everywhere that he can get away with. Doom pulls his lion mask from God, I don't want to know where, and he secures it to his face as he studies the people. These people are slaves, and slaves are no longer people, as a human would never give up hope and allow themselves to be a slave. But even here, there is a hierarchy that he recognizes. An example of that hierarchy steps forward. He's a fit, muscular man, hardened by physical labor. He tells Victor that he's now part of his pack. He will get water for this man, give him half of his food, do half of his work. Victor jabs a hand into the man's throat, crushing his windpipe. Unlike the Honorable Lion at the beginning of the issue, this beast does not deserve a quick death. Victor then pulls another piece of green cloth off of him, good thing that green is such a popular color on Reborn Earth, and puts it on as a hood. He speaks to the crowd as he dresses. He will leave this place. He will take many of them with him, so long as they obey his word. Betray him, and they will die. Quote, "You think you know fear. You think you've known oppression. You have not yet known doom." End quote. See what I mean? Even with another author writing him, you can't help ending an issue featuring Dr. Doom without him saying his own name. It's not just Claremont. This is anybody. If I was writing Dr. Doom, I would be guilty of the same thing. Every issue would end with Doom. Every scene would end with Doom saying his own name. So I have to admit, I love the use of Doom's name here more. Victor Von Doom's drive, ambition, and ruthlessness are on full display in this issue, and it makes his final statement have a lot of weight. It's one of those moments that makes you question whether these people would actually be better off under Doom or Al-Khalad. Like, yes, Al-Khalad has enslaved them, and he is willing to work them to death, but Doom is also clearly willing to kill whoever he has to in order to accomplish his goals. I, personally, would still argue that he is more honorable. I think his note that the guy at the end being less deserving of a swift death demonstrates this. Victor understands the needs and drives of an animal, and he can respect those. But he also understands the psychology of man, and he understands what type of person thrives while under slavery, one with no respect for themselves or others. By his estimation, any human who won't fight for their freedom doesn't deserve respect. They are less than an animal, and so when he kills this man, he makes it hurt. We've seen Victor Von Doom studied before, mainly during Claremont's Heroes Reborn one-shots, and while I think that the core of the character is well represented, is well represented. And while I think that the core of the character is well represented in both stories, I think that Dixon's interpretation feels much more villainous. He's colder and more cunning, and perhaps that's only evident because he has been stripped of his usual bag of tricks. Claremont's Doctor Doom felt like someone who could be a hero, but has occasionally been forced to make selfish decisions. Dixon's Doctor Doom feels much more like someone who solely makes selfish decisions, and those decisions occasionally benefit those around him. I can't say which one of them I like better. Like, they both work, and they both serve the narrative that they're trying to sell. I do appreciate that Dixon has a much more focused and direct way of speaking for Doom compared to Claremont's more verbose version, though, just from a reading perspective. That is easily my personal taste, and this is a fun comic if you're a fan of Doctor Doom, or honestly of underdog stories. Watching him crawl his way back up from nothing is going to be great. Manco's artwork, while I would describe it as dirty and messy, manages to convey the story that it was paired with well. Despite the lack of explanation of Victor's actions when he was fighting the motorcycle guys, which is something that Claremont would have done, I was able to follow the action easily, and I could see it playing in my mind like an action sequence. Very nicely done. Manco's cover for this issue looks like it's painted as well, like it reminds me of Drew Struzan's movie posters. If you don't feel like Googling Struzan's name, he's the painter behind the movie posters for the first two Star Wars trilogies, the Indiana Jones trilogy, and posters for Rambo's First Blood and the first Back to the Future movie. They're just super iconic to me, and they're perfect like group movie poster shots. This cover is heavy on the blacks, but what colors it does have are very bright and vibrant, and the characters are well arrayed. It is a solid movie poster. The only real downside to it is all of the comic book related stuff like, the title and the publication information because it obscures the fringes of the artwork. Even then, it's still not like a lot of stuff. The cover is super easy to see and all of the notable characters are front and center, but I look at those figures like I'm staring into the comic cover and I'm wowed. But then I pull back to try and enjoy the whole image and I'm less wowed. I'm 75% wowed, which still isn't bad, I'm just saying. Next week, we will continue to follow Victor Von Doom's journey on Reborn Earth as he fights to regain his spot at the top. In Comic Book Breakdown's next episode, 12.25, Doom is alone and outnumbered. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me, to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.